early morning of the 7th of the 7th of the 7th this year, about 1:35 a.m, my friend Paula and I arrived at the top of Nap Hill. And then around 3:13, I'm told from the timing on the tape that we all experienced a big white flash in the sky. At this point of the evening, about 3:20, it's the darkest point of the night, and as the sky was sort of really laden with clouds, there was absolutely nothing. It was a pitch black field, and there was nothing to be seen down below. But at about 20 to 4, some light was creeping in then from the east with the sun coming up, and we began to see a shadow, or what appeared to be shadows on the field. It was at this point when he looked through the camera that we all could see through the viewfinder that there was a massive, absolutely massive, spectacular formation down there below us.
You've been researching crop circles for what, 11 years now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In that time, we've seen the crop circle patterns changing. They started off with very kind of basic circular type shapes. The geometric shapes increased, then we started to get pictograms. What's happening now? What's the kind of current pattern?
The actual evolution continues as it has since 1978, which was the inception of the first major crop circles in southern England that were taken seriously. Since then, as you say, there has been a constant evolution.
On the evening it's the early morning of the 7th of the 7th of the 7th this year, about 1:35 a.m, my friend Paula and I arrived at the top of Nap Hill to begin an all-night vigil looking over Eastfield in the hope that a formation may appear. And then around 3:13, I'm told from the timing on the tape that we all experienced a big white flash in the sky, which very momentarily lit the whole sky up and the whole landscape, but it was very momentarily. At this point of the evening, about 3:20, it's the darkest point of the night, and as the sky was sort of really laden with clouds, there was absolutely nothing. It was a pitch black field, and there was nothing to be seen down below. But at about 20 to 4, some light was creeping in then from the east with the sun coming up, and we began to see a shadow, or what appeared to be shadows on the field. It was at this point when he looked through the camera that we all could see through the viewfinder that there was a massive, absolutely massive, spectacular formation down there below us.
This was the formation that occurred on the 7th of the 7th of 07 last year.
Yep.
From construction point of view, first of all, you've got to have at least on this construction 2 centres to work that particular geometry out. So you would expect to find somewhere around here post holes.
That certainly is the case. That this fine, what would be considered a construction line, was certainly laid down first in both of these major arcs, However, we went into this formation very early on the first day, on the 7th of July, and we actually managed to get into lots of these circles and pick up the crop and examine this fine line, and that was not crushed in this situation where it would have had to have been crushed rhythmically if this was made by people. Also, you know, the peripheries of all the main circles, you know, to define a circle you need to, you know, effectively create your, you know, your circle, your outer line, and typically on a hoaxed formation there would be heavy crushing to define a circle in a thin path, and then the rest would just be filled in. That was also not present in this formation. Also very, very noteworthy is the topography of the land inside this particular formation. Down this end, from around about here, sloping down to here, this was actually raising up like a large hill in the field. So this part of the formation was around about 3 to 4 meters higher than this part of the formation. So if you took a line from somewhere out here to create your arc, your semicircle effectively, it would have actually been almost a physical impossibility to do that, because your rope would have been on the ground about here, and you would have been dragging through the standing crop. So just a physical creation of that one arc would be extremely problematic. So on the whole, we were effectively looking for crushing around peripheral areas, central construction points, edges of circles, and like you said, post holes, stuff like that. And you would effectively go out into the field looking for areas within, you know, within your standing crop where people would have had to stand to create a wider image. In this particular case, none of the evidence that would suggest a hoax was present on the ground very early in the morning on the first day.
Some of these circles, it's very hard to see here when you get down to the actual, when you got down to the actual landscape. They're ever so tiny, aren't they?
Yeah.
The detail is amazing.
So what's extremely interesting about this, and it relates again to the actual topography of the land. This circle here was effectively on dead flat ground.
Right.
This circle here was on quite a heavy slope.
Yes.
And I measured both of these circles in cross section, and this circle, which was on heavily sloping ground, was elliptical, and it was elliptical by a large degree. We were talking like about 3 meters squashed in one side. This circle, which was on flat ground, was perfectly round. Now, if you go out and put a peg in the ground and fake a circle, it's going to be round, however steep the hill is. Everything about this formation suggested it came down. This circle looked circular from above, as did all of the ones on the slopes. Viewed from above, they're circular. Measured on the ground, they're elliptical.
Right.
Creating an ellipse on the ground physically, just draw an ellipse. It's very difficult to get it correct. Draw a circle, it's actually relatively easy. You know. So, and the same, I've measured many formations of a similar kind of nature over the years, most notably the Milk Hill 409 spiral from 2001. I spent an entire afternoon measuring one of the arms. One arm from the Milk Hill was kind of similar in effect to one of these, and that the position of that circle in the landscape, it was on a heavily undulating hilltop, you know, it's 1,000 foot wide. The whole formation, you could stand in any given part of it and just see bits
of it,
and when taking the time to measure one arm, literally I think there was around about 70 circles in each arm.
Wow.
Pretty much every circle which I personally measured in the same way, cross sections, every circle that was on the sloping ground was elliptical, every circle that was on flat ground was round.
As though it had either been stamped down or created to represent a circle when viewed from above.
Yeah. Final analyses of the original tapes taken by Wynne Keach shows this entire formation emerging in 8 minutes, and it's as if it scans into the field, so it's like a line goes across the field towards the hillside, towards the camera, and the whole thing just scans in, very subtle, very soft, no flashing lights, no Hollywood special effects, very simple, quite vague, almost boring, but there it is, it appears in 8 minutes. And you know, that would take 400 hoaxes 8 minutes to make that circle, and I didn't see him. I didn't see him in the film.
And they'd be quite noisy, wouldn't they? Something I believe happens when they say that it's not hoax, is that the lays tend to form patterns within themselves. You find the kind of spiral twists, you find the crisscross twists. There's a number of patterns in there, as well as kind of anomalous damage to the crop itself as well.
Sure. I would say there doesn't seem to be any one singular uniform method of crop laying down. You know, practically every single circle I've been in over the years, which is hundreds and hundreds of circles examined, most of the time the crop is kind of laid down differently, but we must remember we've got all different kinds of crop, and the age of the crop seems to make a difference. This was very mature-ish wheat, you know, as opposed to very young barley. The effect on crop seems very, very different, you know, depending on, as opposed to, say, oilseed rape or sweet corn. You know, these are huge, thick plants, and it's an entirely different subject almost again. So one has to be very careful about looking at physical evidence and then using that as a uniform protocol for looking at the entire crop phenomena.
It's the original hoaxers as we know them, Doug and Dave. One of them's died, the other guy kind of actually admitted that it wasn't him anyway, didn't he? But since then, you know, Team Satan, all these other kind of guys have dived in and said, yeah, we hoaxed every single one of those, we claim responsibility for those. When you're out in the field, literally as it were, out in these circles, out in these designs, what is it that stands out to you that suggests that maybe we're getting two things happening? We are getting hoaxing, but we're getting some kind of phenomenon as well. Is there a difference between circles, between designs, between the way they're laid?
There certainly is. I mean, on the ground, if you take a broad perspective that all the crop circles from any given year, from all over the world, there is a certain amount of different styles, if you will, in a sense, even varying from region to region or country to country slightly. We go into a crop circle on the ground, okay, first we need to be to get an honest, reasonable and realistic physical analysis on the ground, we need to be in there very quickly, because clearly once numbers of people or busloads of visitors or tourists have gone in, you don't know how many people have been there, what they've been doing and where they were walking for sure. So if you're looking at physical damage, you don't know if this is caused by visitors, by hoaxers from the night before. So it becomes fairly inconclusive at that point. So really one has to be there probably by 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, especially in the busy part of the summer, to make a reasonable physical judgment. And at that time, if you get to the formations quickly, then yes, there are things to look for which would suggest it's a physical creation by some kind of mechanical device.
Such as?
Compression marks around the edges. In this formation here, for instance, we have, like, underlying all of these circles are kind of a fine arc, like a straight line. You can just see it between. You can just see it between the circles. So, for instance, if we go into this crops formation very early on the first day, we'd walk into all of the circles, and you'd kind of effectively pick, you know, the thin line has gone down, and all the wheat has swelled down on top. What one would do is lift up the crop which is laid down on top, exposing this fine line. And if this has been made by any kind of physical mechanism, that fine line would have had to have been basically crushed down to the ground by planks or feet. Right. So we'd pick the crop up on top and see if the corn underneath is actually crushed in a kind of a rhythmic way, like foot paces. Incidentally, in this formation it actually was not.
We're hitting into crop circles now, you know, quite a few years later. It's not as though it's breaking news, it's not as though it's amazing stuff, or is it? Is there something that's going on that makes crop circles still worth watching? Are we looking at a phenomenon that's unfolding before our eyes?
Okay. The evolution thus far has taken us to the point where we are receiving, almost on a daily basis in the summer months, huge, highly complex mathematical patterns of a real technical order. And at this time, you know, 30 years down the line, the origins of the majority of those circles remains a complete mystery. So absolutely certainly it is well worth looking at. And whilst the evidence is on the table, as it has been for 20 or so years at least, you know, we're talking mathematical, biological and physical sciences which amount to evidence on the table, so it's suggesting without any doubt whatsoever that something strange and anomalous is happening to these plants inside the crop circles. That makes it well worth looking at. And the evolution is constant. They seem to be getting bigger and more impressive from a technical point of view year on year, and just this year.